Hi, everyone, and welcome. This is Take the Lead, Change the Game, a podcast for women leaders looking to deepen their knowledge and skills and find enjoyment in the process. We're powered by Safra Leadership. Safra is a cohort-based coaching experience designed to fuel courage and ignite impact among women professionals. I'm Lindsay Goldford Gray, and I'm here with my co-host, Mindy Gulati. We're the co-founders of Safra. Together, we bring a blend of leadership coaching, strategy, and lived experience to help women navigate challenges, seize opportunities, and lead with confidence.
Hi, everyone. Excited to be here with you today. Some of us have heard, most of us have heard in our careers, be less friendly, tone it down, you're too much. Women receive constant feedback to make themselves smaller in order to be respected. And it's something that Lindsay and I have talked to dozens and dozens, maybe hundreds of people about, and we've experienced in our life. This episode is really going to give you some thoughts about how to challenge that advice using something called the warmth competence framework. We're going to talk about how to build your status without diminishing yourself and think strategically about how to increase these things instead of diminish yourself. And so we're excited to spend some time with you today.
Yeah. So we've talked about this on the podcast, I think at least once before, but I think it's been a few months. So when we're talking about status, we are talking about others' perception of you, because a lot of us think of status as like wealth status. That's not what we're talking about here. So what we're talking about is how it's viewed in academic research, which is how do other people perceive you? And in order to increase positive perception by others, the research shows that that perception kind of runs on a double axis, and one axis is warmth. So do people perceive you as kind, as friendly, as someone who cares about others? And then the other piece of that is competence. So do people see you as capable? Part of competence is assertive. Do people see you as assertive? And so that's sort of how people make those often instantaneous or immediate calculations. Women face something in status called a negative stereotype violation or a double bind. And so what happens with women often is we are seen as usually warmer and less competent, or sometimes maybe more typical of, female lawyers, we're seen as very competent but cold. Whereas men don't face quite the double bind that we do. They can more easily be seen as both. But for us, we face a little bit of a double bind in that area. And so one of the things we want to talk about today is how do we approach that, right? How do we counterbalance that? Mindy, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, and I think that this is, a really important topic because as we start to get into it, you'll probably find yourself being like, oh yeah, that's happened to me, or that's currently happening to me. Because in conversations I've had with women leaders, this is actually a pretty prominent issue in terms of always kind of self-monitoring for whether they are being too direct, too, intense, assertive, or whether they are perceived as not being serious enough because they're warm, because they're kind, because maybe they're funny or whatever it may be. And so I think this is actually one of the most prominent issues that women face that, maybe it's not framed in the way we're going to frame it today, but I think it's something that we should all think about in our own careers. But then if we're mentoring or leading other women, we need to be really conscious of.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the advice, sort of to your point at the very beginning, Mindy, the advice and the trap that we can fall into is making ourselves smaller or shrinking the aspect of ourself that is stronger, as opposed to dialing up the counter lever, right? So, you're too friendly, you're too assertive, you're too this, you're too that. Shrink yourself, make yourself smaller. But in reality, instead of doing that, we need to be sort of going forward and dialing up sort of the counterbalancing piece to increase our status, as opposed to just making ourselves small, which, shocking, women are often told to do. Yeah. So Mindy, can you give us an
Yeah.
example
Yeah.
of a time when you've faced sort of, this double bind and how you've handled it?
Yeah. So, a lot of my work with leadership teams is around navigating really difficult conversations. I do something called strategic alignment sessions where I get executive teams in a room and we really have to figure out where we're going. And there can be lots of conflict in this. And there's lots of conflict when people are having legal trouble, when people, when organizations are facing a lot of pressures. And so, when I walk in that room, I have to be very assertive, very direct, commanding and controlling. I am the one in charge. And that's really what I'm there for. It's what I'm getting paid for, my competency. So and that's, what I have to lead with. But I always am careful because I don't want people to not see me as someone who cares about them. And so I always, and I do something that maybe people think is funny or weird, but in order to dial up my warmth when I know I'm about to have to go into a really hard conversation, and then I do this sometimes after the conversation, is I buy these little crochet dumpster fires. They're on like a subscribe and save. Actually, I get them so often because I have so many hard conversations. But I bring in this little crochet dumpster, and it says like, we're fine, I'm fine, everything's fine. And I really give it to be like, hey, like we're gonna make it through, and like I know this is hard, and like I want you to know that I'm thinking about you as a person and I see you as a person, and people love them. And then it's not even just for that moment. Like I often will walk back through that law firm or that company and they're sitting up on the shelf, that little dumpster. I actually just had someone recently, a lawyer, send me a picture of the one I gave him. He just like took a picture of it in his office. He's like, thinking of you, like in this dumpster fire. And so what I think what that does for me is it allows me to be that high, assertive, intense, direct. I'm not diminishing that, but I'm just showing a lot of love and that I'm thinking of them. The other thing I'll say, what I've also done, just another quick tip, is I navigated some really tough conversations in a law firm a couple years ago. And I started the conversation by sitting in a chair in front of the group, and it was all partners at a firm. And I just said, hey, I'm here because I care about you all. And I said, I'm giving you a lot of love. This is going to be a very hard day. But I'm coming to you because I care about you, because I don't have to be here. I know you're paying me to be here, but like, I'm here because I care about you and I care about your firm. And just that allowed me to get into the hard hitting kind of fierceness that was needed. But I think that like, let everyone take a breath of like, oh, she's not just here to like go hard. And I think it's, for me, it allows me to keep and amplify the competency side. But I am a warm person. I'm very loving and compassionate. And I think you do better in life when you have both of them dialed up. But you got to do something like unique to you. You got to do something that fits right for you, right? Maybe it's another idea, but those are kind of a couple examples from me.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love the crochet dumpsters. I think that's really awesome, especially when people are going through crisis. I know you do a lot of crisis management, and so I'm sure they work well in that situation too.
Yeah.
One of the things, Mindy, you and I gave a presentation last week to a group of women lawyers, and one person said during the presentation that they were told or had heard, like, don't ever bring cookies, as an example. Don't ever bring cookies to the office. And this is for someone that is probably viewed much like generally higher on the warm side. And so it was like, oh, no, don't dial up your warmth anymore, right? Like, because you won't be taken seriously. Or I don't actually know specifically what the rationale is, but I assume it was something to that extent. And I remember you and I's reaction was like, oh, wow, never bring cookies. But in fact, that person who you and I know fairly well is pretty good at dialing up their competence and should not be, our reaction was don't make yourself small. You are both warm and competent, and it's good to be viewed as warm. And in fact, like if you bring cookies to the office, everybody's going to want to tell you everything because you're already warm, right? Like you're already a warm, inviting person, and you get cookies as a bonus. And so I think that's sort of the counter example of, like, again, someone being told to make themselves smaller or to shrink one axis in order to sort of face that double bind. But in reality, you know, being her authentic self, which may or may not involve cookies, I'm going to the party either way, you know, like, is beneficial and helpful in raising her status.
Yeah, and I think the complicate well, not the complication, but the prevalence of this is, I mean, it's enormous. But the complication is that a lot of people have been told, a lot of women are told very early on in their careers that there's like these rules, like, you know, you're a woman in a male dominated workplace, you should not be warm, and you should be, you should act like this, and you should do this. Or you're a woman in a male dominated organization, you should be more warm because people will think you're a bitch, or they'll
you have to fit the stereotype.
And so it's like women get both. They get told both things of like, don't be too warm, don't be too competent. They're never told, be more competent, be more warm, right? Like, so it's just so interesting. And I think that it's advice that it's not grounded in any reality. But I do think it hurts people, because you and I, Lindsay, both have met women who, I mean, they still struggle with this of like, how am I being perceived? And it's like, well, who are you authentically? Because the woman you talked about with the cookies, like, her natural speed is super warm, both professionally and personally. And so why would she ever want to diminish that? That's who she is, and it's awesome. But there's a lot of us get advice all throughout time to look a certain way, act a certain way, dial down. And I think this does affect like women of color a lot more than like white 100%. Women, of just like, don't raise your voice, or don't talk in this way, or it's so complicated. But what Lindsay and I are really saying is it's really about dialing these things up from the academic research tells us this, instead of trying to dim that awesome part of who you are.
Yeah, I definitely think that's true. Let's, in terms of like examples, so we talked about the dumpster and the cookies. What are some additional ways that women can dial up warmth, for example?
Yeah, I mean, I think that you can, I think there's things like, so we have like the gift giving examples that we've done, but I think you can also invite others to come into like the conversation, like be more collaborative. I think that there's other things that you can do, like tell people what your intention is, set the context. Sort of my story about, telling that group of male partners, like, I really care about you, is telling them the intention is like, we're here to have this hard conversation because I care, because if I didn't, we wouldn't be having this. So I do think warmth isn't just about giving dumpsters or cookies, but it can also just like be saying hi to people, knowing about their life, like knowing about what their kids' sports are. So you can be like, hey, how was the basketball game last night? Those little things make a big difference in how people perceive you. And so making eye contact, one big complaint I get in in-person environments is people are always just staring at their phone and they never say hi to each other and they never look at each other. Like, these kinds of things are super simple ways to be warm, to just be in the elevator and say hi to your colleague and not just be like scrolling the whole time. So there's other ways you can express warmth that are genuine to you. So all of this should feel genuine to you, because that's how people will actually believe that you're warm. And then I think, Lindsay, do you have suggestions for how to dial up your competency?
Yeah, I do. And I have one other thought on the warmth, and that is, I really like to acknowledge social cues. So if I say something that's like very decisive, right? Or if I'm like moving and shaking and making a plan, and I see someone sort of like, raise their eyebrows or look away or look uncomfortable, I can say, hey, I noticed that you like, pulled your head back there, or whatever it is. Like, can you tell me what's going on in your head? And it's a way similar to something you said earlier, like acknowledge the humanity of the person, right? They have thoughts and feelings as well, while also being like, this is a decision, I'm being decisive, in terms of how to dial up the confidence, I guess, sort of to go back to what I just said, I think being really assertive and decisive is important. So if you are, especially in a leadership role, to say, like, this is the plan, this is where we're going, and here's why, I think is really important, as opposed to being more, so this is what I'm thinking, what do you all think, and you can certainly ask for feedback, but I think I would go into, let's say, a meeting and say, I've thought this through, this is what I suggest, here's why, I'd love your feedback, as opposed to like, I think it might be best, right? Like, to have a more assertive sort of presentation, I think can really dial up the confidence. And then, of course, to be able to articulate why shows that you actually have been thoughtful, and are demonstrating high competence in the situation.
Yeah, I really like that. I really like that example. Sorry, go ahead.
No. Another thing I wanted to flag was something else that came up in our presentation last week, that I just want to name here, and maybe we'll spend a whole episode talking about it at some point, but we're talking a lot about other people's perception of us. And, we're getting a little bit away of this whole, like, other people are telling us what to do. And we're sort of being like, well, the academic research says do X, Y, Z. But I really want to clarify, because we had a question last week that was a very good question, where it was like, well, I tell my children not to care what other people think. So, like, is this just, I mean, this wasn't the way the question was phrased, but the way I heard it was like, is this just perpetuating, like, women could, should, must be something else other than who they are? And I think what's really important to know here is what we are talking about is how to use what we understand about perception in pursuit of our own goals that is true to who we are. This is not about, like, conforming to what somebody else says so that other people will like us, right? So I just really want to make that clear, because this is not what we're talking about, is like how women can be better.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's more of how do we exist in a system and in a space where women are not treated fairly often. And so I'm calling this out, but yeah, and we should, Lindsay, let's do it. We'll do a podcast on this sort of like, should you care what people think about you? But I do think that it is advantageous for us to be self-reflective about where we could do things better, because I will say, as someone who's very assertive and direct, like, picking up on people's cues is super important for me, because I can just like kick ass and get shit done and make 1,000 decisions and I'm ready. But like, I have to read the room. Like, I have to use that emotional intelligence to be like, are people following me? Are they going along with me? And that's when my cue is warmth now needs to come in. And maybe it's a joke, or maybe it's a like, and sometimes I'll be like, man, I'm going fast. Like, do we need to take a break? Like, let's all take a deep breath, or like, or I make some sort of funny joke to sort of cut the tension. But you have to pick up on that. That doesn't mean I'm being told what to do. It means that I'm being responsive to the other humans that are around.
Yes, totally. Well, as we wrap up here, I'd love to encourage folks to think about, what's one way which one are you stronger in generally, or maybe in a specific situation, which one are you tend to come off stronger in, warmth or competence? And then what's a way that you can dial up the counter level as opposed to dialing back? That's what I'd encourage folks to think about this week.
Yeah, definitely. And we'll get back with another layer to this. I would also really think about when you observe, if you're a leader, I would encourage you to think about the advice that you give to people. So go slow. Don't just give the old advice of like, oh, you need to do X, Y, and Z. Like, be more mindful about it, because what you say has a big impact on the people you're around. And so, be a part of the solution and not add to these layers of sort of the double bind that women face.
Absolutely. All right, everybody. Well, we'll see you next week. Take care.
Take care.
Bye.